Welcome back to Leveling Up with Ariel Miller. I'm your host and welcome to episode 5. And this one I'm calling Everybody is Beautiful. Now, if you've been following me on social media, this is not something new when I say everybody is beautiful. It's kind of one of the sayings that I like to use a lot. Emphasis on the body in all caps. And recently I encountered some pretty ugly body shaming, but I wanted to make this not about me, but more about an open dialogue and what that looks like for all of us in body inclusivity. So I wanted to use episode 5 to talk about everybody and that all of our bodies are beautiful. So let's take a moment to think about how often we are told to change our appearance. If you think about it, magazines, ads, and everything that surrounds us or that's pumped into our lives, whether it's through TV, whether it's through advertisements on the radio or things that you see on like the sidebars on your computers and all those kinds of things, that what are these ads saying? What's the messages, right? And the messages are usually like, lose weight while you sleep, or these superfoods have been proven to help you lose weight, or, you know, hide this, lift this, tuck this, shape this. I mean, there are companies all about teaching you or showing you how you can buy their product and look smaller, thinner, and hide this and hide that, and smooth this and smooth that. And all of the messages we get are about changing and altering our appearance. Not only about shapewear, but you think about your hair, think about your lashes, think about your eyebrows. And this may seem like we're cutting the men out of the equation here, but it's really for everyone. You know, we can't ever be tan enough. We can't ever be manicured enough. We can't ever be tight enough. So if you think about it, the messaging that we're always getting is that we're never good enough, right? How we are in the here and in the now isn't good enough, and it needs to be changed. We need to look a certain way and be a certain way. But something else that I want us to think about is think about the messaging in the media as far as in movies and TV shows when we think about characters that are overweight. If you take a moment and you think about it, the characters that are overweight are usually like the outcast, or they're the comic relief, aka the funny guy, or how about that self-depreciating humor, like the funny guy who tears himself down, and you know, the fat person makes all the fat jokes and those kinds of things. And it's become this really ugly underbelly of society where we're just, you know, stereotyping, fat shaming people based upon how they look without really considering the damaging effects that this is having. So if you think about the messaging that we're getting from the media, and you think about the messaging that we see in TV shows and film and all that, you know, fat is not considered beautiful. And I don't even understand, like, who's to say what is fat and what isn't fat? I mean, who decides these standards is beyond me. But the thing is like, even if you do like yourself, it's hard to. It's hard to confidently say that you love yourself when the messaging from the media is telling you that you should change. So if the messaging from the media is telling you that you should be fitter, thinner, tanner, have fuller, longer hair, and you should look, your hair should be blonder, it should be this, it should be that. If this is the messaging that we're getting and it's implying that I'm not good enough, well, then how do I like myself? And if I'm being completely honest, this is something that I talk a lot about with my friends, is like, I love myself. I really do like myself. And when the world tells me that there is something wrong with me and my body, like my body is considered undesirable and that my features are precisely what we're trying to change, you know, it's hard for someone who really, truly, and authentically likes themselves to continue telling themselves, I like myself, I like myself, I like myself, when all of the messaging completely negates that. So it becomes even a more challenging struggle, as far as I'm concerned, to continue to celebrate myself if continuously I'm fighting this uphill battle. I like my thighs, I like my butt, I like my arms, yet everything else that surrounds me says, well, you should change that. How you look is not good enough, and that's not ideal. So that's really the challenge, right? The challenge is how do we continue to love ourselves when everything else tells us around us that how you look, how you are, isn't good enough, and it's not ideal. So where does this lead us is my question. So in a world that tells you that there is something wrong, I want us to think about the damning effects of body shaming. And I wanted to define body shaming because I want us to remember throughout this episode that words have power. Body shaming, noun. The action or practice of humiliating someone by making mocking or critical comments about their body or size. So when I say that words have power, my entire life, I've lived as a fat girl. And I've had this conversation recently with someone on social media, and also while looking at a trainer posting their base and how their base was very different from where they are now, and how their base comparative to mine was significantly different. So your base, like let's say your natural genetic coding, right? I've mentioned this before on my podcast. My natural genetic coding is on the fatty side. Some people's genetic coding is on the lean side. So just like I don't know what it's like to be on the lean side, and I'll get to that later in this episode, being a fat girl is something, completely different. We all have our own struggles. So I've lived my life as a fat girl, and I've mentioned that before. I've mentioned that I have had to shop in the husky section is what it was called when I was a kid. I've mentioned that when I was a kid, I had an eating disorder, and I can't really kind of pinpoint where this came from. What I can say is that I was overweight. I was ridiculed mercilessly by the kids for it. I didn't have many friends because I wasn't cool. I wasn't pretty. And the other thing is like my parents worked, so I wasn't able to participate in all the other things that the kids participated in. So I couldn't go to after school activities. I didn't dance. I didn't play soccer. I didn't play softball until I was much older. And at that point, the friendships had already been formed, and everyone had already formulated their opinions about who you are, how you looked, where you were from, and what they thought of you kind of thing. So for my entire life, I've always had this kind of disordered mentality when it came to my eating, my fitness, and how I saw myself. And it's always been a struggle where I always would call myself fat to people. I'd say, oh yeah, I'm fat. And now as I've gotten older, I've become hyper aware of if you're ever around someone and you say, oh, I'm fat, if you look at people's reactions, like it makes people uncomfortable. And I'm not fat. So it probably makes people feel even more uncomfortable because it might seem like a ploy for attention, or that I truly am authentically suffering from some sort of body dysmorphia. And then at that point, there's a cause for concern. But since I have struggled with feeling like there was something always wrong with me, my problem areas, if you will, have always been my thighs or my glutes and my midsection. For my whole life, even my father would make fun of my thighs. I have been mercilessly taunted for the size of my thighs. And it wasn't until I've turned this corner much later in my life that I started to really embrace my thighs. But growing up, it was hard. It still actually is really hard for me to buy pants. And my thighs have been a source of insecurity because they are huge. My dad calls them cone legs because there's like an ice cream cone down by my ankle and my foot. It like tapers, and as you go up towards the towards my belly button at the upper part of my leg, it just gets wider and wider and wider. So those are my legs. I have cone legs. Recently, I was at the Antelope Valley, California Poppy Preserve, and I've mentioned the poppies as well, but we're having this amazing super bloom of the California poppies and other wildflowers here in California. So I had gone to go see the flowers with my friend, and we had wanted to celebrate taking photos on the trail because all of these thousands of people are trampling the trails and they're rooting the flowers. And I wanted to show people that you can go and enjoy nature's splendor and not ruin it. So as I'm posting up to take this photo on a bench with the flowers behind me, I'm wearing short spandex shorts and a little sweatshirt. And I was leaning back with one leg bent, and I was like looking off. And a woman is watching as my friend is taking this picture, and she says, oh, I think you should put the thigh down so it's not too much. And there was like this millisecond response of mine. First, sheer shock. I could not possibly fathom that another woman had the audacity to even say that. I couldn't even wrap my head around it. So then I swivel my head over to her, to which I say, well, these are my thighs and I'm not ashamed of them. And that was that. So we grab my phone, we start walking again. I would say about 20 minutes later, we encountered the same woman and I was taking photos again. And then I turned to her and I say, oh, well, don't worry, my thigh's not in this one. And perhaps that probably wasn't the most appropriate thing for me to say or the most appropriate reaction, but it certainly did open up a dialogue. And that's the point, is the point of what I'm trying to share is that what this is about when I'm talking about everybody is beautiful, when it comes to body shaming, body inclusivity, body positive, body positivity, body exclusivity, is that I want to shed light on how we can work together to empower all bodies. Because every single body, every single shape, every single size, every single color is beautiful. And who am I and who are you and who are they to say otherwise? Because like I mentioned earlier, words have power. I would be lying if I said to you that every time someone said something nasty to me about my body, that it didn't hurt, because it hurts. I have been told on social media by typically men that I would look better if I were thinner. And it's hurtful no matter who it comes from, where it comes from, and how it's said. And it's even more hurtful when it comes from people who care about you or you think care about you. And it becomes a point where you start to doubt everything about who you are and your self-worth. And that's what this shouldn't be, because our body should not be toggled to our self-worth, because we're so much more than what's on the outside. It's about what we have going on in here. It's about the integrity with which you live your life. It's about the legacy you leave behind in this world, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if your thighs touch or if they don't touch. It doesn't matter how full your hair was, how long your lashes were, or how tan your skin was. It matters what ripples for all of eternity. So let's continue to consider how we can rewrite this dialogue. So the questioning that I have for you is, how do we change this messaging? And I'm going to come back to these questions later on, is how do we change these questions? Or excuse me, how do we change the messaging? How do we play a role in said messaging? How do we stand up to others and for ourselves, which self-advocacy is really important. And I mentioned that in my last episode, in episode 4. How do we create a body inclusive culture and a culture that is body positive? Now, I recognize that over the course of this episode, we're likely not going to come to that answer, but I want us to start thinking about how each and every one of us play a role in change, and how we can stop talking about how there needs to be change and how we need to actually work consciously and actively for said change. I think part of creating this change, first and foremost, comes from telling our stories, sharing our struggles, which ultimately brings us together. And what it really says is that we stand united. We're not scared of being vulnerable, but what it also does is it shows that you're not alone. What I have done for this episode is I have compiled a bunch of stories. In addition to my own, which I've shared, I wanted to use this episode as a way to unveil what we battle in the world every day from other people's words, and how damaging they can be, and how we must stand together to fight this, that we must stand up to companies, to people, to family, to whomever feels the need to comment on your body, because you don't need permission to look a certain way. You don't need approval to look a certain way. So let's keep that in mind. The first person that I'm choosing to talk about here, and I will preface this with I'm calling everyone by their initials, is a fitness influencer person who I'm friendly with, who is an incredible, incredible body positive advocate, and we'll call her AK. And I reached out to her when I did this episode because she posts and comments about this almost daily in her IG stories about how she gets torn apart constantly for her physique. She has what I would consider to be an incredibly strong physique, one that comes from years and years of disciplined training and eating. And she is so strong and so inspiring and so beautiful inside and out. And she gets this constant ridicule from men telling her that she shouldn't lift so much and that she looks manly. And she'll also get that same kind of dialogue from women. And I asked her, I said, how do you deal with this? How do you combat this kind of negativity? And she laughed and she said, I don't pay much attention to it anymore. It's almost like it happens so much and so often that I don't even hear it and I don't even see it because I'm comfortable with who I am. Now, that is the ultimate goal for all of us to get to that point where we're that comfortable with ourselves that we're kind of like, I'm rubber and you're glue and whatever you say bounces off of me and sticks to you. And I would love to get to that point. And I'm not there. And I think it's okay if we don't ever really get there. But I think if we continue to have this consciousness about the things that we say to people and really evaluate why we're saying them in the first place, I think it's going to be the beginning of the end of feeling this, that we have this permissive right to comment on people's bodies. The second person that I'm going to talk about is a person who was actually a former student in my classroom many, many years ago. We'll call her CM. She shared 2 anecdotes with me, and she shared anecdotes about being bullied for her legs when she was in high school. She was being bullied that they were too big, and she felt embarrassed and ugly. And I want to just re-emphasize that we should never, ever tear someone down for the sake of tearing someone down, because what we say impacts people's psyches. To which she also shared that along the same vein of thighs, she had been having a conversation with a coworker mentioning that when it's hot out, her thighs chafe. And I don't know about you guys, but when it's hot out, as someone who's got the thickest thighs around, like wearing dresses in the summer, it's not cool and it's not comfortable. How many of you ladies out there are like, oh my God, I have to wear spandex underneath my dresses because my thighs rub together? Apparently the life hack people say is powder. Been there, done that, doesn't work. I'm probably getting to that point where I'm going to use like Body Glide, which is what marathoners use so their bodies don't chafe. If you've used Body Glide, or if you have like a life hack to keep your thighs from chafing, please share. I would love to be able to share that with other people. But coming back to CM, she had said that she had commented when it was hot out that she had hated that her thighs chafed when it was hot. And her coworkers said, yeah, well, my thighs have never touched, so I don't know what that feels like. And lots of people's thighs haven't touched. But there is a way to phrase things or to contribute to the conversation in a way that is useful instead of hurtful. Really simply said as like, I can understand that might be really uncomfortable, and then leave it at that. But there is no need to give this like backhanded, like, oh, I don't know what that feels like. The victory here for CM that I want to share, and she had mentioned this to me, is that now that she's older, she loves her thighs and they're her favorite part of her body. So we have like these 2 anecdotes that I've shared so far with AK and with CM, and how, you know, AK doesn't pay much mind to it anymore. And she's had plenty of time to develop that thick skin, and how CM, again, it took time for her to embrace this part of her body that other people have told her wasn't good enough. Another student of mine shared that, actually, excuse me, it wasn't another student, another person rather is what I meant to say, had reached out to me on Instagram by the initials of MW. And she's a dancer. And she had said that her college mentor in her modern dance program had said a comment to her that was completely off color. So to preface this conversation, she had gone to see her professor to have her sign off on paperwork so she could come dance in Los Angeles. That was the purpose for her meeting with this instructor. And at this point, the instructor felt the need to tell her that she would do a lot better in the program if she lost 20 pounds. So I ask you, what does this girl having to go work in Los Angeles have anything to do with needing to lose 20 pounds? I don't get it. And what I don't understand is why someone felt that it was okay to just offer this unwarranted, unsolicited comment on this person's body. BC was in a performing arts program as a section leader. She wasn't the section leader, but the section leader said something to her. She was halfway through a month-long tour where for 7 days a week, 8 to 12 hours a day, they marched on a football field, and they were at dinner, and her section leader in this program said to her when she went to go get seconds that she didn't need any extra weight. And I asked BC, what did you do? And she said, I looked at my section leader and I went and got seconds. Good for you, BC. Miss SW is a fitness professional, and Miss SW is also a dancer. And Miss SW recently had serious back surgery, and she had been out of work for 3 months, and she was getting her pre-op physical when she went to go see a doctor for the pre-op physical, and she had gained some weight, which would make sense because as a fitness professional, you're very, very active. But also prior to this person's spine surgery, prior to SW's spine surgery, she had been out of work, like I mentioned, for 3 months because she was directed to not move her body, to keep her body safe. So then the doctor says to her, oh, well, you should really be more physical. And SW shared that this made her feel really vulnerable because she's aware of the changes that her body is experiencing as a result of the changes in her physical activity. But here she is having a very, very high risk surgery for her spine so that she can return to physical activity, and she's scared. And then there's this callous, inconsiderate remark about her weight. And then when SW brings to light the whole scenario and situation, she said the doctor had, some backpedaling to do. NR had a distant relative come visit her, and the distant relative says to her, you used to look so beautiful. What happened? You should eat more. And she shared that she had recently lost weight as a result of hormonal changes, but also because she was growing up. She was getting older and she had grown taller. And I had asked her, I said, well, what did you say? I mean, it's always really shocking when family has the audacity, or I think family thinks that there is this no filter necessary when it's family. So I had asked her, I said, well, what did you say? And she said, frankly, I couldn't think about what to say, but this person was my elder. So out of respect for the fact that they were my elder, I couldn't say anything. I felt paralyzed because by proxy of them being my elder. However, if I were given the chance to speak up for myself, what I would say is, how would or does gaining weight benefit my beauty? And that's the transition, because what I have shared are with my story and previous stories about when we think of body shaming or body positivity, we think that it's about this culture of people that are maybe thicker than what society says are thin is beautiful, right? We think of maybe our plus size models and that kind of culture. We think of women with thick, juicy thighs and soft midsections, and all of those images are what we associate when we think of body positivity. But we tend to not think about this other side of when people are extremely thin or extremely skinny and how they're affected by people's commentary and the world's exclusions of their bodies. So let's keep that in mind as we transition, because this whole concept of words having power is not just about to people who we think are overweight or people who we think are larger in size, because people, regardless of size, regardless of shape, and regardless of color, are not impervious to people's terrible words. LP, and this is really hard for me to share because it's really near and dear to my heart. So LP has been thin most of her life, and as a result of a chronic illness called scleroderma, which my husband also has, and I think I've mentioned this, she's lost a lot of weight. And at this point in her life, she is considered vastly underweight with the thigh gap and the whole thing. And she explained that the looks that she gets from people, she said, to quote her, that she can't describe it, that people will look her up and down and people will stare at her in horror because she is so thin. She hears people comment all the time on her body size. And she shared an anecdote about being at Target and how she went there to go get kitty litter one day. And she hears this girl say, did you see how skinny she was? And LP recalls having to fight back the tears and how she beelined for her car as fast as she could, and she cried. And she cried because of what this person said. She also says that older women will berate her for being so thin. And she shared that, you know, she believes it's because people think that she's chosen to have an eating disorder because that's the perception, or that's the belief, or the choice that we want to look at this person and think that that's what they've decided. They've decided, I want to be sick, I want to be thin, I have an eating disorder. And maybe she does have an eating disorder, meaning not LP, but what if someone does have an eating disorder and they are emaciated? That's their battle, that's their struggle. And who are we to cast shade and to judge them for that? Because everyone is fighting a battle. And whether we wear that battle physically or we wear it internally, it doesn't matter, but it's not for anyone to comment on or to pass judgment. So it's about a consciousness. And LP shares that these older women will say that if she hangs out with them long enough, and how they'll fatten her up with pasta, and how they'll also tell her to go eat some McDonald's. And again, while I think people are well-intended, that kind of commentary on someone's body when it's unsolicited has harmful effects, as we'll see in CW's anecdote as well. CW does a really good point of what I think is pointing out, as well as LP, the other side is she says that her weight is associated with her mental health. And she's also another woman who is very, very thin. And she loves to work out and spends a lot of time in the gym. And she said that the gym was always a safe place for her. She always felt that she could be herself here, and that she wasn't self-conscious of her body. But things have changed, because there were women, these two women in particular, who comment on her weight and her body and in relation to her overall health. And she says that, you know, she sees these women and she becomes self-conscious of how she looks, because they will remark whether she's gained weight or lost weight, and then related in conjunction to her personal life or her professional life and how things are going, based upon whether she's losing weight or gaining weight. And she explains that, and her exact word that she uses is, it made me feel icky. And it made her feel uncomfortable. But the biggest thing for her was that if these people notice my weight gain or my weight loss, then maybe others notice too. And I want to point this out because CW said something that I thought was transformative. She sent through this process of how, when I would posted looking for anecdotes on social media about people's experience with body shaming and those kinds of things, she said it made her reflective, because she was able to also think about how she unintentionally harmed other people, but not in the way you think. It hit her that comments about what we would consider positive aspects of people's physiques could potentially be harmful as well. So if you think about it, if you tell someone that they're looking healthier, perhaps that can be misconstrued as someone looking overweight or fat or heavy or bloated, when the term "you look healthy" maybe is implying that you're radiant and that you're glowing and you look good. And also, if you remark upon someone's fitness level of, oh wow, I didn't realize how fit you were, that while these comments are seemingly benign, that perhaps these comments could have the other intended effect, that they could potentially be harmful to someone, that they could hurt someone. And I didn't think about it until I was reading CW's email to me, that the words that we use that we think have a positive connotation don't necessarily. It just depends on your audience. Because I can tell you that if someone told me I looked healthy, I would immediately think, oh my God, do I look like I'm pregnant? Did I gain weight? What do you mean? Does my face look full? That's where I would go if someone told me I looked healthy. But and that's the thing. When did looking healthy become an insult? It's not an insult, by the way. And when did looking lean become a compliment? And I've mentioned this before, and I say this all the time, is like, you know, you hear here that there are people who are very thin, and it's not because they want to be. It's not because they have an eating disorder and that they're starving themselves. It's because they're sick. So LP has a chronic illness, an autoimmune condition that makes it very difficult for her to gain weight. CW, her weight is toggled to her mental health. And now I'm going to share with you my final anecdote, which is BA. And BA, very similar to LP, suffers from IBS. And she shared with me that it's very, very hard for her to eat certain foods, in particular fried foods. It's also very difficult for her to eat at certain times, and if her stomach has become aggravated or if she's not feeling well, she can't eat. And she explained that people will berate her for not eating. People will judge her for making certain choices. For example, she says when she visits her family, she likes to go to this smoothie place and get these healthy ingredients that she enjoys, and how her friends and her family will judge her and say, you know, call her bougie and snobby and say like, oh, our stuff's not good enough for you. You have to go to that place. To which she explained that it's not a matter of me needing to go somewhere that I think I'm better than you. This is what my body likes, and this is what feels good for me. And I have a condition. I have a condition that gets exasperated if I eat unhealthy foods. She had shared with me as well, and we spoke on the phone, and I can feel the sorrow and the pain in her voice because it's the other side, right? I sometimes feel self-conscious as a fitness professional and as someone who may err on the heavier side, that if I get something unhealthy at a restaurant, like, hell yeah, I want French fries. I love French fries, okay? If I want French fries, I know that people are looking at me and they're passing their judgment. Or the other side is I go out with people and they're like, oh, Ariel, don't judge me. I'm going to get something unhealthy. I don't give a fuck what you eat. I really don't give a fuck what you eat. As long as you like it and you live your best life, I don't care what you eat. So in BA's situation, she had explained that she had been out with friends and it had been late at night and they all had gone out to eat and they were all getting this delightful fried food. And she didn't say anything. She wasn't ordering anything. She's not going to get any food. She's going to sit there though and partake in the conversation. She said that she became vilified amongst her friends and her peer group because she wasn't eating. And we both discussed this, that I think that where that comes from is a projection. I think it's a projection of other people's insecurities or feeling uncomfortable. For example, you know, if people aren't drinking at a party, you know, and other people are drinking, the people who are drinking typically feel uncomfortable by other people not drinking and be like, oh my God, why aren't you drinking? I'm not sober, but sometimes I just don't feel like drinking. I'll go to a party and not drink, or I'll have one drink and that's it. Like, I don't need to apologize for not wanting to drink. And if I'm making you uncomfortable because I'm choosing not to drink, like, that's on you. So she and I had discussed, BA and I had discussed that, you know, that comes from somewhere else. People projecting onto you their own issues, but it's misplaced. People maybe know they shouldn't be eating it, or they're trying to achieve something, but they're making this choice and they don't feel 100% good about it. So they're going to go ahead and misguide and misplace that anger onto someone else who at that time happens to be someone who they feel is an appropriate target, somebody who is, you know, not eating or not indulging or not drinking or not participating. And that's really where I think a lot of this may come from, is a projection of inadequacy, a projection of what we think is a societal ideal. So that brings me back to my initial questions that I want us to remember. So how do we change this messaging? How do we play a role in said messaging? How do we stand up to others and for ourselves? How do we create body inclusivity and a body positive culture? So big ideas there to think about. I think the biggest thing that I want us to walk away from this episode with is a sense of awareness, a sense of understanding that our words have power. Our words have the ability to uplift others. Our words have the ability to empower, to inspire. but our words also have the ability to tear others down, to divide others. Our words have the ability to destroy self-esteem. And it's really important to continue to think about that everyone in this world has insecurities. I have lots of them. And I'm pretty open about them because I know that by me sharing my story and being open, by me sharing how I truly feel about things, my body and this world, that I'm reaching other people and giving them permission to feel their feelings and to be vulnerable. But everyone has their own insecurities. And the reality is how we see ourselves is most often different than how others see us. So we have to continue to remember to be kind and compassionate, not only to others, but also to ourselves. And that compassion is so important because when we talk about compassion, and I talk about this a lot, it's not just practicing compassion to others and to ourselves. It's practicing it twofold. It can't just be one or the other. You can't just be compassionate to yourself and not to others. And you can't just be compassionate to others and not to yourself. Because if you're only compassionate to others and not to yourself, you're not practicing what you preach and you become disingenuous. And people can sense that. So while we can always buy new shoes, you can always dress up this body. I can dye my hair. I can curl it. I could straighten it. I can fill in my eyebrows, Mom. For those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, my mom has a massive issue with my eyebrows right now. I mean, I think they look pretty awesome, but she's not enjoying them. And she's been very vocal about that. But I ask you, my friends, my mom, and everyone else, is when we comment on someone else's appearance, why are we so uncomfortable by their appearance? Why do you care so much? Why does how I choose to wear my eyebrows have anything to do with how you live your life? And how does the fact that I've got a big butt impact your life when I choose, or big thighs, and I choose to wear spandex shorts? Like, why do you care? It's just something to think about. So while we can always go ahead and buy these new things, you can't ever buy a new body. You can't. Well, you kind of can, but we'll talk about that in a moment. So I think it's important to remember that we have to nourish the body, not just with wholesome nutrients and those kinds of things. It's that we have to nourish the body with healthy thoughts, with wholesome thoughts, because what you think certainly does become a reality. But we have to keep that positive dialogue, because if we feed our bodies, hearts, and minds positivity, it truly seeps through your pores. It truly radiates from inward to this outward world. So the work has to be done inside first. You have to come to peace with who you are. You have to truly, wholly, absolutely, utterly, unapologetically love this body. Love this skin, love this hair. And I say this skin, I don't have good skin right now. My skin is a mess, but I'm taking the steps to heal it, to heal myself, to make it better. And you know what? In the meantime, so I wear a little makeup. Now I have an excuse to go buy some new highlighter, much to my husband's dismay. You just have to make the best with what you have and love what you have, because how can you expect other people to celebrate what you have if you yourself don't? You can't expect other people to love you and to love this. And by this, it's the whole shape, the whole form, the whole color, if you yourself don't embrace it. So here's what I think we need to do is, one, we need to identify people in our lives who are body positive, who are body inclusive, who are maybe even body neutral. And by spending time with these people, or like I had mentioned in a recent episode about your news feed on Facebook and social media on Instagram, is that finding these people who evoke those positive emotions, but finding people who you know can be that body positive advocate for when you're struggling, because those people will be helpful on your own journey. And they'll help you when you're struggling with, you know, that internalized body shaming, and they're going to help you view yourself and others in a more positive way. So identify those power players in your life. And if it's not someone you know intimately, maybe form a relationship with someone, or Perhaps you follow someone who inspires you, but it's an opportunity to build a bridge. I think the most important thing beyond finding your people, and I mentioned doing the inward work, is finding what you love about your body. As I mentioned before, with AK and CM, they have embraced their bodies. Parts that other people have deemed ugly or not good enough are now parts of their body that they enjoy. So what do you celebrate about your body? I will share what I celebrate about my body. First of all, something that really bothers me is when people will give me a backhanded compliment and they'll be like, you have a great butt. Butts are so in right now. And I will be like, thank you. And in my head, I'm like, so you're telling me that my butt is in right now, so it's great? Well, in the 90s, when heroin chic was in, was my big butt not cool? I mean, come on, it's my body. Is there ever a thing or a time when a body part is in or not in? Like, why do we have trends where it's like big boobs are the thing, super long hair is the thing, women are getting butt implants? Like, why are body parts trending? That's what we really need to continue to think about, is how we've arrived at this point where body parts are now trending. My butt is not a fad. My butt is my butt. And no matter what I do, it's going to be bootylicious till the day I die. So have I learned to embrace it? Yep, I've learned to embrace it. I like it. It's meaty. It's juicy. And you know what? It's mine. It's mine. That's it. And I have to own it. And if I don't love it, then I can't expect the world to love it. And here's the deal. I don't care if the world likes it. I am not asking for permission. I am not asking for you to like it. It is what it is. I want us to remember that part of this process is confronting those who perpetuate body shaming. I have a friend whom I love dearly who struggles to really, I don't know how she struggles, but what I will say is I don't think understands what it's like to walk in someone else's skin, because she errs on a naturally thinner side. Her body fat is significantly lower than mine and than most people. And she's got a wonderful physique, and I don't ever want to take that away from her. However, a compliment that I have been given by her in the past, not now, was, oh, wow, you're thinner than me. That's not a compliment. That's hurtful. And at the time, I didn't have the strength to stand up to her and say, like, that's not cool. Like, that hurts my feelings. And I think I just said, and like walked away. Recently, and I said recently in the last year or so, the same person, we'd be at the gym or we'd be out, and this person would be, oh, I'm so fat, and would like grab her non-existent belly fat. And I said to her, I said, you know, it really hurts me when you say that. It really hurts me when you say you're fat, because you're not. And I'm not fat either, but as someone who truly knows what it's like to struggle with this constant dichotomy of I love myself, but the world tells me I shouldn't love myself, or I'm not good enough because I don't look like you. You know, when you say something like that, it's really insensitive. And it was a turning point, because I don't think up until that point she realized that her words had power, that she's not fat. She knows she's not fat. But what she meant to say was, I don't feel like good about myself right now, or I feel bloated, or I feel uncomfortable, or I'm not as lean as I've been, or whatever it may be. But it was, again, an opportunity to have a dialogue, because I confronted her, because words have power, right? Words have the power to divide us or unite us. So potentially a conversation that could have pissed me off and I could have been like deuces and gone in my own direction, I used it, like I mentioned, as an opportunity to kind of bring us back together to build a bridge. My big call to action for you, everyone, is to demand that companies represent body inclusive models, period. This is my call to action. I am asking you to advocate that companies use bodies that represent body inclusivity. For the love of God, I want to scroll through social media. I want to open up a magazine. I want to drive through Los Angeles and see a billboard with a girl who looks like me. I don't want to see the same body type perpetuated over and over for a toxic mindset. We need to demand that companies start representing bodies of various shapes, various sizes, and various ethnicities. And on my own crusade, I've started to do the following. I've started to do it to the point where now people on social media will start sending me advertisements from other pages because they know I'm going to reach out. I've started reaching out to companies that when I go through their social media and I see these heavily manicured ads that are photoshopped, or when I see these dangerously thin models, or when I see on a whole page that it's all this same body type and the same skin color over and over and over again, I start commenting, emailing, and messaging. And I'm not coming from a place of anger and frustration. Use your words. Like I say to my students, use your words. You are smart and you function as a person of high intellect. You are articulate. Stand in your power and own your awesome and advocate for yourself. Advocate that our society start to celebrate body inclusivity. Email companies and demand that we start representing a more wider scope of women, men, and athletes in this world. What makes our world such a beautiful place is we're all different. Different colors, different religions, different genders, different ethnicities, eat different food. All of that is what's beautiful and should be celebrated. But if we're celebrating or not celebrating, if we continue to just, pump out these Stepford images, it's damning. So my call to action is to start demanding that companies stop photoshopping, stop airdropping, airbrushing. I'm not editing that out because that's hilarious. The airdropping. That they stop airbrushing their photos, and that we start demanding that these companies represent body inclusive ads. We need to do the work on the inside. So doing the work on the outside is a small short-term fix. So if you don't like your face, for example, I'm having issues with my skin, I can in the short term cover it with green concealer and powder and bronzer and highlighter. But that's not the solution. It's a temporary fix to a greater problem, whether it be hormonal, and that's why I'm experiencing issues with my skin, whether it be that it's a topical situation from my sweating, wearing my makeup in the gym, whatever it can be. So I've started to seek the help of an esthetician who has given me products to help with my skin that's specifically tailored to my unique issues and what I'm battling. It's taking that action. It's doing the work. The easy part is putting the Band-Aid on something, right? So if you don't like how you look, going to get plastic surgery, while I do not judge at all, more power to you as long as you love yourself. I don't care what you do. But I implore you that if you're going to make these moves and you're going to do something as drastic as plastic surgery, is that you do that inner sizing as well. And I say inner sizing because we exercise the physical, which also does impact the mental. But if we do that inner sizing, that real work on the inside, then we start to repair so much more. And when I say doing the work inside, is really realizing that we are so much more than our bodies. I've mentioned it several times, but I am not my body, and my body is not me. This body isn't going to be remembered when I leave this world. Your body isn't going to be remembered when you leave this world. What will ripple and echo through eternity are the wonderful things you've done. Maybe advocating that these companies start to change how they portray their advertisements and their models. What you do and what you hold and what you feel in your heart does and should matter. So I implore you to hold other people accountable, but also to hold yourself accountable to loving the skin that you are in as we continue to fight this battle together. Thank you so much to listening to Leveling Up. My name is Ariel. It's been a pleasure sharing this journey with you. And I'd like to remind you that everybody is beautiful. If you would like to find me on social media, you can find me at Ariel_Miller, and I would be more than happy to interact with you if you go ahead and hit me up and let me know the kinds of things that you'd like to hear. Again, thank you so much for your time, and I'm looking forward to tuning in with you next week. Love you, mean it. Mwah!